word is pusillanimous. All right, spell susurration. Next up, aegis. Spell apocryphal. Can you spell inchoate? The next word is jurisprudence. Can you spell Cyrillic? Spell acromatophilia. The next word is serendipity. Spell capricious. Your word is rhinorrhgia. Spell soliloquy. Next up, allotransplantation. Can you spell anti-disestablishmentarianism? Your word is autothaumaturgist. Your word is pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. Can you spell supercalifragilisticexpialidocious? Can you spell polyphyloprogenitive? The next word is convolvulaceous. The next word is institutionalization. Next up, quadrimodative. All right, spell adrenocorticotrophin. Spell arthroeresis. Next up, radiometeorograph. Your word is bourgeoisie. Next up, hypoparathyroidism. The next word is quindecasyllabic. All right, spell institutionalization. All right, spell autothaumaturgist. Next up, pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. Can you spell psychoneuroimmunology? Next up, convolvulaceous. Spell gastroenterologist. The next word is glyceraldehyde. Your word is radiometeorograph. Next up, parallelogrammatic. Spell oligonucleotide. Can you spell bourgeoisification? All right, spell anti-disestablishmentarianism. Next up, pneumoencephalography. Can you spell polyphyloprogenitive? All right, spell arthroeresis. Your word is quadammodative. Next up, ethnomethodology. All right, spell bourgeoisie. Your word is honorific abilitudinity. Your word is psychoneuroendocrinological. The next word is anthropomorphization. Can you spell psychophysicotherapeutics? Can you spell adrenocorticotrophin? The next word is xylotypographic. All right, spell otorhinolaryngological. All right, spell supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. All right, spell hippopotamonstrosesquipedaliophobia. Your word is floxinosinyhilipilification. Spell psychoneuroimmunology. Your word is parallelogrammatic. All right, spell hypoparathyroidism. Spell pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. Spell radiometeorograph. Next up, bourgeoisie. Spell autothaumaturgist. Next up, convolvulaceous. The next word is glyceraldehyde. Spell psychoneuroendocrinological. Next up, honorific abilitudinity. The next word is xylotypographic. All right, spell bourgeoisification. All right, spell anthropomorphization. Spell institutionalization. Spell polyphyloprogenitive. All right, spell hippopotamonstrosesquipedaliophobia. All right, spell quadammodative. All right, spell psychophysicotherapeutics. All right, spell pneumoencephalography. Can you spell quindicasyllabic? The next word is oligonucleotide. All right, spell gastroenterologist. The next word is anti-disestablishmentarianism. Can you spell arthroeresis? Spell supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. All right, spell adrenocorticotrophin. Your word is floxinosinyhilipilification. All right, spell otorhinolaryngological. Can you spell ethnomethodology? Can you spell floxinosinyhilipilification? Spell adrenocorticotrophin. Spell hippopotamonstrosusquipedaliophobia. Next up, psychoneuroimmunology. The next word is pneumoencephalography. The next word is bourgeoisie. Spell institutionalization. Spell gastroenterologist. Next up, anthropomorphization. All right, spell convolvulaceous. Next up, bourgeoisification. Next up, psychoneuroendocrinological. Your word is hieroglyphics. Spell prestidigitation. Your word is lepidopterology. All right, spell Bogolanfini. Spell pulchritudinous. Can you spell jurisprudence? Next up, isthmus. Your word is acromatophil. Next up, Cyrillic. Your word is languid. Next up, dichotomization. Next up, gubernatorial. All right, spell portmanteau. Next up, abakashi. Next up, deoxyribonucleic. Next up, compartmentalization. Your word is serendipity. Next up, dendrochronology. Can you spell prognostication? Can you spell fuchsia? Your word is Aegis. Can you spell acromatophilia? All right, spell paroxysm. Spell baccalaureate. Next up, fossiliferous. Your word is superferromagnetism. Next up, susurration. The next word is sesquipedalian. Your word is infinitesimal. Next up, quixotry. Next up, pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. Spell hypoparathyroidism. Can you spell anti-disestablishmentarianism? All right, spell autothaumaturgist. Can you spell parallelogrammatic? Your word is quadrimodative. Your word is xylotypographic. Spell polyphyloprogenitive. The next word is glyceraldehyde. The next word is psychophysicotherapeutics. All right, spell otorhinolaryngological. Next up, quindicasyllabic. The next word is honorific abilitudinity. Spell arthroeresis. All right, spell ethnomethodology. Next up, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Spell oligonucleotide. Next up, radiometeorograph. Spell autothaumaturgist. The next word is convolvulaceous. Next up, oligonucleotide. Spell psychoneuroimmunology. All right, spell floxinosinyhilipilification. Spell supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Spell arthroeresis. All right, spell bourgeoisification. Next up, quindicasyllabic. Next up, psychophysicotherapeutics. Can you spell anti-disestablishmentarianism? Next up, adrenocorticotrophin. The next word is institutionalization. Can you spell hippopotamonstrosusquipedaliophobia? Next up, gastroenterologist. Next up, bourgeoisie. Next up, honorific abilitudinity. All right, spell glyceraldehyde. The next word is parallelogrammatic. The next word is ethnomethodology. Spell polyphyloprogenitive. Spell xylotypographic. Can you spell psychoneuroendocrinological? Spell quadrimodative. All right, spell hypoparathyroidism. All right, spell radiometeorograph. Spell pneumoencephalography. Next up, anthropomorphization. Can you spell otorhinolaryngological? The next word is pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. All right, spell gubernatorial. Spell infundibulum. Next up, baccalaureate. Next up, paraphernalia. Can you spell capoeira? Can you spell languid? Can you spell Cyrillic? All right, spell apocryphal. Can you spell Bogolanfini? Spell inchoate. The next word is absquatulate. The next word is batrachophobia. All right, spell bureaucracy. Can you spell onomatopoeia? Spell supererogatory. Spell allotransplantation. Next up, portmanteau. All right, spell hieroglyphics. Next up, milieu. Your word is neuropsychological. Can you spell antediluvian? Next up, jurisprudence. Your word is achromatophil. The next word is incomprehensibility. All right, spell perspicacious. Spell subcompartmentalization. Next up, borborygmus. All right, spell labyrinthine. Spell isthmus. Next up, compartmentalization. The next word is pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. Spell psychoneuroimmunology. Next up, adrenocorticotrophin. Your word is oligonucleotide. Next up, parallelogrammatic. Can you spell autothaumaturgist? Next up, bourgeoisie. Can you spell floxinaucinihilipilification? All right, spell otorhinolaryngological. Your word is glyceraldehyde. Can you spell arthroeresis? Can you spell bourgeoisification? All right, spell radiometeorograph. Your word is polyphyloprogenitive. All right, spell honorific abilitudinity. Can you spell gastroenterologist? Can you spell psychoneuroendocrinological? All right, spell quindicasyllabic. Your word is supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Next up, institutionalization. All right, spell hypoparathyroidism. All right, spell capricious. Next up, susurration. All right, spell prognostication. Spell paradigm. Your word is paroxysm. Your word is dendrochronology. Can you spell utilitarianism? The next word is acquiesce. The next word is Worcestershire. Can you spell iconoclast? Your word is dichotomization. Next up, soliloquy.